Dallas, the political rage in America escalates, leading one man to violence.
I mean, it takes some kind of stamina to keep your thoughts together. And I'm very worried about his fitness.
We're not allowed to punch back anymore. I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks.
So the lid's down and shut your mouth.
This political rhetoric and political discourse that has led to hate has led to gunfire.
We'll discuss how the partisan climate has grown so toxic and what politicians and the media can do about it. With one of the survivors of the shooting, Republican Congressman Rodney Davis, and with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar. Then President Trump confirms he is now under investigation as the special counsel broadens the Russia probe to look into possible obstruction of justice. We'll discuss the potential case against the president and his defense strategy with Jay Sekulow, a member of his legal team. Plus, President Trump announces a rollback of the Obama administration's opening to Cuba.
Effective immediately, I am canceling the last administration's completely one-sided deal with Cuba.
We'll ask our Sunday panel if the new policy goes too far or not far enough. And our Power Player of the Week, one man's journey bringing comfort to foster children.
A child deserves to own something that's brand new, that belongs to them.
All right now on Fox News Sunday. Hello again and happy Father's Day from Fox News in Washington. The nation's capital is still shaken from this week's attack, where a gunman opened fire on Republican members of Congress during a baseball practice. House Whip Steve Scalise has been upgraded from critical condition to serious after several operations. And on both sides of the aisle, officials are asking how they contributed to the toxic political climate and what they can do to change it. Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar joins us in a few minutes, but first from Springfield, Illinois, Congressman Rodney Davis, who was on that field during Wednesday's shooting. Congressman, first of all and most important, how are you 4 days after the attack? How you doing?
You know, Chris, it's still pretty surreal. I can tell you this is the best Father's Day I've ever had, to be able to come back home and see the outpouring of care and support from the people that know me best, including my family, has just been a really humbling event and very memorable for me and my family.
Have you gotten over it in an emotional sense, or are you still in shock?
You know, people tell you how you're supposed to feel, but it never seems that you do. I mean, I still sense normalcy. There are times when I'm probably a little more agitated. There are things that I'm going to do differently in my life and in my workplace to ensure that we probably put security more as a priority than we had in the past. And it's a sad state to be in when you just woke up a few days ago, got in a car, and went to a baseball field to practice for a charity game, and next thing you know, bullets are flying.
I want to take you back to just after the shooting. Here you are, sir.
This political rhetoric and political discourse that has led to hate has led to gunfire. I called my wife and my children immediately when I got a hold of a phone. They told them I love you.
Justices coming to these
and Dad's
games,
okay.
Not just members of Congress and senators, but officials and...
Congressman, you said that you were at your breaking point and you called this an act of political, rhetorical terrorism. Now that you've had a few days to think about it, what do all of us, politicians and media, what can we do to change it? And frankly, how long do you think that new leaf will last?
Well, I may have made it too complicated, Chris. I want to change that to just political terrorism, because obviously the evidence from the shooter, this maniac who began firing at all of us, shows that he turned his religion into politics. And when somebody turns their religion into politics, They're no better than anyone else who hijacks a religion and tries to indiscriminately kill innocent people. That's what we experienced that day, and I thank God every day those two Capitol policemen, Agent Bailey and Agent Griner, were there to save us all. I hope and pray that we can take this day, this tragedy that could have been much, much worse, and turn it into an opportunity to come together as Americans, because no one, I don't care what side you're on, no one deserves to have the violence that we all experienced just 4 short days ago.
In 2011, after Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was shot in a shopping center outside Tucson, President Obama made a similar appeal. Take a look, sir.
It's important for us to pause for a moment and make sure that we're talking with each other in a way that heals, not in a way that wounds.
But, Congressman, as you know all too well, since then, the political discourse in this country has only gotten worse.
You know, it has, Chris, and that polarization has seemingly continued to rise on both sides and creating the fringes on the right and the left. And that's why, since I've been elected to Congress, I've tried to be somebody who talks about bipartisanship, who actually has a record of bipartisanship. And now I want to stand up and ask the American people, those of us who are the majority in this country, who want Republicans and Democrats to work together, let's stand up to the hate on both sides. Let's stand up to the rhetoric that we see that leads to this polarization, that led to bullets being fired at a baseball field just a few days ago.
Final question. There's been a lot of talk about beefing up security for members of Congress, even talk about members like yourself being able to carry your own guns for self-protection. How do you think we can balance, on the one hand, the fact that you want voters to have access to you, but on the other hand, you need to be protected?
Well, that's a debate that we're going to continue to have, but I think it's an important debate to have. And Chris, I want to tell you, and all of your viewers, you know, I was cleaning out my baseball bag the day after the shooting, after we played our congressional baseball game for charity. And as I pulled something out from the area where you store your bats, I saw something drop on the ground. And here it is today, Chris. This is a piece of shrapnel from a madman who came to politically kill innocent people. This is the reminder that all of us have, that we have to take a step back in this country. We have to tone down this rhetoric, and we've got to come together as a nation, as Americans, and say enough is enough. I thank you for having me on, too, Chris.
Well, I thank you for that message, sir. Thank you. Thanks for your time. I know that this will be a special Father's Day for you and your family, sir.
Yes, it will.
And joining us now from Minneapolis, Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar. Senator, I want to start with a town hall last month in North Dakota where one voter confronted Republican Congressman Kevin Cramer about the effort to repeal and replace Obamacare. Here it is.
That's a question. Answer it yes or no. Will the rich benefit? Shut your mouth. Will the rich benefit from if the health care is destroyed? Do the rich get a tax break? Yes or no? Of course not.
It was the same back in 2010 when Republicans, members of the Tea Party, were going after Democrats for trying to pass Obamacare in the first place. Has our politics gotten out of control, Senator?
Well, thank you for that question, Chris. And I first of all want to say I'm so pleased by the words from Congressman Davis. I'm glad he's safe. I'm so glad Representative Scalise that his condition is improving. And I do think that the language, the rhetoric on both sides has gotten out of control. And as you know, it is on both sides. I am someone that believes you have to treat people civilly, that you can disagree, and that courage is truly not whether you're going to yell at someone in the middle of an empty chamber, but whether you're willing to stand next to someone you don't always agree with for the betterment of this country. And that means finding common ground and higher ground. I think it's Senator Enzi of Wyoming, a Republican, who has said, you know, We disagree on a lot of things, but we can agree on about 80% of the things 80% of the time. And so trying to find those areas, whether it be funding for roads and bridges, that we need to upgrade that, whether it be looking for ways that we can all say, you know, not everyone needs a 4-year degree. Let's get more kids into jobs where we have openings and give them those skills. I think there are areas where we can find common ground, and that's what I've tried to do in my work.
But part of the problem, Senator, is we seem to be in a vicious cycle. Back in 2010, Democrats passed Obamacare without a single Republican vote. This year, Republicans seem to be trying to pass repeal and replace without a single Democratic vote. How do you stop the vicious cycle?
Well, you can start right now. As you know, the American people would really like to see us work together on health care, and there are plenty of changes that we need to make to the Affordable Care Act, like bringing the prices of prescription drugs down, bills that I have with Senator McCain and Senator Grassley, two Republicans, as well as work we should be doing to make sure the exchanges are strong. But doing this behind closed doors is actually not what we did with the Affordable Care Act. So I'm hopeful that this would be an opportunity, given what we're seeing across the country with the prices of prescription drugs, where we could work on that together. I found common ground.
Senator, let me just ask you a question about that. And you know, part of this is both sides got to admit they're doing some things wrong. Haven't Democrats held up an awful lot of Trump nominations? I know some of them are conservative, but some of them are well within the mainstream. I saw an item today that the average wait between nomination and confirmation for George W. Bush and Obama was a couple of days. For Donald Trump, it has been 25 days, the average wait, the delay. Would you agree that your party is guilty of some obstruction here?
I'm not saying we're perfect throughout time, but I do know that all of his cabinet nominees are now in place, that they have been voted on, some with significant Democratic support, and that also now we're working down to the next level. And they've actually, has been well reported, haven't put people up for a lot of those positions. When they come up, especially in the military area, the security area, we've tried to move quickly on those. So we need to do what we can to fill those positions. But again, the president has to govern and not just squander those moments away when he, you know, sends out tweets at 7 in the morning, because I do think there are many of us that want to govern, that believe we are out of a crisis in the economy. We're at a time of opportunity, so let's use that opportunity.
I'm going to get to those tweets in a moment, but generally after an attack like this, Democrats are quick, and you in some cases have been quick to talk about gun control. This time, almost all Democrats, including you, have been silent about tougher gun controls. How come?
Well, I think, first of all, this was a man with severe mental illnesses. We don't know all the facts here. Yes, we came together with Republicans like Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania and said we should have better background checks. We did that at the last time after Sandy Hook. We were unsuccessful. But I think that what we need to look at, of course, I'm ranking on the Rules Committee. We should be looking at security, how we can beef up security at events like this and in the Capitol. But the bigger lesson from this to me is that I hope people, just like they did on that baseball field, I was there with the 25,000 people that joined in, all four leaders were out on the field actually looking like they liked each other. At the end, when the Democrats won the game, they gave the trophy to the Republicans and asked them to put it in Representative Scalise's office. We need to take that spirit and go from two teams to one team for America.
I want to ask you, as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, you mentioned tweets, and I want to ask you about President Trump's tweet on Friday. Let's put it up on the screen. I am being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director. Witch hunt. Question, do you believe the president is trying to get rid of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and perhaps also the special counsel, Robert Mueller?
Well, I hope not. Representative Ryan, Speaker Ryan, has given him the advice that he needs to let the special counsel do his job. And as a factual matter, Rod Rosenstein has told the Senate in a briefing, and he said we could say it publicly, that the president had made up his mind already to fire Jim Comey before he even wrote that memo. And then finally, these tweets Chris, these tweets really, every time one goes out, it does squander this moment of governorship. I think that there are areas we can come together with the administration, with Republicans, including things like infrastructure, things like doing something on workforce training, doing something on tax reform, but it's going to be really hard to do that when those tweets come out at 7 in the morning, and then the whole focus of Washington and the country is on what the president said last time. So let's use this moment to govern.
Final question. If the president does go ahead, and there's some talk about firing Rod Rosenstein or firing Robert Mueller, what will the reaction be in Congress?
I think that would be, to use Lindsey Graham's words, a disaster, because Mueller is just starting to do his work. The chips will fall where they may. This is about a foreign government, the country of Russia, trying to influence an American election. As Marco Rubio himself has said, this time it was one party, one candidate. Next time it will be another. So we need to figure out what happened and then move forward together as a country. And the president should not be firing the man, Rod Rosenstein, who was, in fact, the person that was appointed by George Bush, has served valiantly as a U.S. attorney and is simply trying to do his job. Bob Mueller, former FBI director, strongly supported by Republicans in the past. Let them do their work.
Senator Klobuchar, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Always good to talk with you.
Happy Father's Day, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And remember to get your kids to call their dad.
Yes, that's a very important thing. I'm texting my daughter after we stop and reminding her to do the same.
Well, maybe she watched the show, so maybe you won't need to.
Yeah, exactly, if
up
she's
next,
awake.
We'll bring in our Sunday group to discuss calls for unity here in Washington and how long they will last. Chilling footage from Wednesday's attack on the GOP congressional baseball practice that left 4 people shot, including a member of Congress, and the gunman dead. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume, columnist for The Hill, Juan Williams, Julie Pace, the new Washington bureau chief for the Associated Press. Congratulations, Julie.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Deserves applause, but yes. Anyway, and Washington Examiner contributor Lisa Booth. No, it does deserve applause. Brit, obviously nobody can directly link this attack, the actions of a deranged man, to the political climate in Washington, but why have things turned so venomous here over the years, and is there any way to stop it?
Well, what I'd say, Chris, I think that Congressman Davis had it part right and part wrong, because I think the poisonous political climate and the poisonous language with which people who disagree speak of each other is as much, and the attitudes on Capitol Hill are as much a reflection of what's in the country as they are a cause of it. And we hear people speak of each other today in Twitter, in political debate, in a way that never used to be the case. To this extent, people don't merely disagree. They think the other party, the other side, is evil and must be stopped. This is really something new. We need to keep a civil tongue in America and recognize the humanity and the decency of the other side. And what we have is the most vicious sort of name-calling, and it doesn't help when the president, who has certainly been a victim of this himself, adds to it with the force of his own rhetoric. People, you know, you got Lion Ted and Crooked Hillary and bad people, he says, are investigating him. So it all feeds, and it contributes to this climate of rage and hate of the two political viewpoints that predominate in this country. It's poison.
Well, and I want to pick up on that because there was a very interesting story in the New York Times this week where there was a study that was done, and it found that people in the two political parties, I'm not talking about politicians now, I'm talking about people, voters, right. They used to basically have no use for each other. Now they hate each other. Now, I mean, it was a thermometer from 1 to 100 in your feelings, and the average now is 0. That's how ice cold their feelings are for people of the other party. And I guess the question is, how do you change it?
Well, I think you have to understand that the confirmation bias that exists in terms of media content, where do you get your information from, and are you living in a bubble? It's almost become secure in this era of the internet that people look for points of view that affirm their pre-existing prejudices. Friday was the anniversary of Lincoln's famous "House divided against itself cannot stand" speech. I feel like we're in that moment. This is one of the most divided moments, by that measure in the New York Times you talked about, but just by living in this community that I've ever experienced in all my years in Washington. You know, the part that is so, I think, damning was spoken by Jim Mathis, the defense secretary, recently. He was asked what worries him the most. He didn't say any military enemy. He said it was the divisions among us as Americans, the failure to talk, to listen, to be able to come to compromise and some solution. He said we can't go on like this because what we fight for in the military are American principles and values, and yet those are shattered.
President Trump made several appeals this week for unity. Here was his weekly address.
Though we have our differences, what unites us is so much stronger. Our love of our country, our devotion to its people. Now more than ever, these values must guide us and bring us closer together.
Julie, do they feel any responsibility in the White House? Do you hear any talk about that for this division? Obviously, it didn't start with Donald Trump, but I think, as Britt would say, a number of people would feel that he has added to it. And is there any sign that the president, for all of that talk, intends to dial back his rhetoric?
Well, I think if you look at the way the president handled the immediate aftermath of the shooting, his remarks not only there but also in the diplomatic room just hours after this happened, it was measured, it was responsible, it was sober. And then you look at some of his tweets, and he's going back to calling Hillary Clinton crooked Hillary. This is just part of his persona. He does not seem to believe that any of the rhetoric that we've heard from him, both during the campaign and as president, has contributed to this kind of heightened sense of tension that we have between these parties. And I don't anticipate that you're going to see a dramatic shift from him, though, again, I do think that he handled the immediate aftermath in a very responsible way.
Now, we should point out there's plenty of blame to go to both sides, because on the other side you've got that tasteless, on the left there you can see photo op by Kathy Griffin, not funny, and then you also have a production of Julius Caesar, Shakespeare in the Park in New York City, where Julius Caesar, as you can see, looks just like Donald Trump. I mean, there's plenty of hate on the left as well, isn't there, Lisa?
Yes, there absolutely is. But look, you had members of Congress who were on the field being shot at in the aftermath calling for unity. Yet when I questioned the sincerity of some on the left of also those calls for unity, you had the day after the shooting, Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, when asked if the political culture, or a course in political culture, if it was equally afflicting the left and the right, proceeded to attack Republicans going back to 1990s, calling them the sanctimonious Republicans, accusing the president. Mind you, this is the day after a known Bernie Sanders supporter with a list of Republicans to assassinate in his pocket proceeded to carry out that exact thing. This also comes on the heels of October 2016, a GOP office firebomb. February 2017, a 71-year-old staffer of Dana Rohrabacher knocked unconscious. May 2017.
I know. We can point to all those. We can also point to Gabrielle Giffords being shot, a Democratic congresswoman.
But there was no known link between the shooter and the Tea Party. Yet you even have the New York Times editorial board last week
are you really suggesting it's all on one side?
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that when posed this question by Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, the simple answer would have been yes.
Chris, these are politicians. They lead to some extent, but they also follow. And the divisions that you see play out on Capitol Hill and elsewhere in this town, the White House as well, are a function of the sentiments of constituents. That's why, for example, you don't have any real effort to make a deal on Capitol Hill on the part of Democrats with Trump, with whom they might be able to make a deal. It's because their constituents think Trump is utterly evil and unsuited for office, and they don't want any part of him, and they don't want anybody that represents him to have any part of him. That is a reflection. The causes of that go much deeper, but it's not. The leaders can lead, and it takes a great one to lead us out of this if that's going to happen. But they also are following, and it's the broad climate in the country on both sides that is responsible for this.
All right, we have to take a break here. We'll see you all a little later. Up next, the president tweets he's under investigation. A member of Mr. Trump's legal team joins us live. Possible links between Russia and Trump associates and whether the president has tried to shut down that probe took some dramatic new turns this week. Joining me now is Jay Sekulow, a member of the president's legal team. Jay, I want to start with the president's tweet Friday that I discussed with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar. Here it is again. I am being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director. Witch hunt. Has the special counsel, Robert Mueller, formally notified the president that he is under investigation?
The president has not been notified by anyone that he's under investigation. That tweet, Chris, was in response to the Washington Post story that alleged that 5 unnamed sources, anonymous sources, leaked to the Washington Post that the president was in fact under investigation. So that tweet was in response to that. There's been no notification of any investigation. Nothing's changed since James Comey said the president was not a target or a subject of investigation. Nothing's changed.
Well, but you don't know that he isn't under investigation now, do you?
Well, no one's notified us that he is, so I can't read people's minds, but I can tell you this. We have not been notified that there's an investigation of the President of the United States. So that nothing has changed in that regard since James Comey's testimony.
I want to go after another part of his tweet. Why is he going after Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein? First of all, he seems to imply that Rosenstein is investigating him. That's not true. It's Mueller. And secondly, he made it clear in an interview with NBC that he decided to fire Comey well before he ever met with Rod Rosenstein. Take a look.
I was going to fire regardless of recommendation. He made a recommendation. He's highly respected, very good guy, very smart guy. The Democrats like him, the Republicans like him. He made a recommendation, but regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey.
I want to ask you a direct question. Does the president think that Rod Rosenstein has done anything wrong?
No, the president has never said anything about Rod Rosenstein doing anything wrong. Here's what is the legal situation here. There is a constitutional issue when you have this scenario. The president made a determination based on consultative advice. He decided ultimately, he's the commander-in-chief, he gets to make that decision, that James Comey had to go. That was coming, by the way, from groups right, left, and center over the last year. You and I know that. So there's been concern about James Comey. It was put forward in a memorandum, that's what the president's referencing, from the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General requesting the removal of James Comey as the FBI director. And ultimately, that's the president's determination. So here's the constitutional threshold question, Chris. The president takes action based on numerous